Welcome to a deep dive tailored just for you. You mentioned an interest in investment strategies, so we're going to explore some gems from Michael Linton and the Chicago Deal Flow team.
You can find all their great stuff at chicagodealflow.com.
And I have to say, it's fascinating how many people, think commercial real estate is just about buying and selling buildings, right?
It's so much more.
It really is. Michael Linton breaks it down from career paths to the ins and outs of the market itself. Today, we're diving into his articles on industry overviews, the world of brokerage, the lending side of things, and some thoughts on market analysis.
One thing I find cool about Michael Linton is he doesn't just focus on the numbers. He talks about, the people, the forces that shape this whole world.
Exactly. It's a whole ecosystem.
Totally.
And one of the things that struck me when I was first looking through this was just the variety of careers in commercial real estate.
Well, for sure.
I mean, we're not just talking about brokers.
Nope.
There's so many different paths.
Acquisitions, development, you could be a lender, you could do appraisals. It's amazing the different skills you need for each one.
It's like almost like choosing your own adventure in the world of commercial real estate.
Yeah. You can be the deal maker, the builder, the financier, or, the analyst.
And one of the things Michael Linton says is you don't need that like Wall Street pedigree to be successful in this world.
Right, right. He's big on networking, building relationships, and really understanding the local markets, too.
Which is so cool because, it might be intimidating to somebody who's not coming from a high finance background.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's dive into one of these paths, shall we?
Yeah.
How about brokerage? Because Michael Linton is pretty upfront about what that's like.
Yeah, he doesn't sugarcoat it at all. It's a high stakes environment.
Yeah.
Lots of pressure. You're working on commission, tons of competition, and you got to put in those long hours.
I was fascinated by his description of the hiring process at some of these firms.
Oh, yeah.
He says some interviews can be like those super intense sales scenarios, like, that scene in Boiler Room where they're all on the phone cold calling.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
He says it's really a sink or swim mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. He even mentions like high burnout rates.
Right, right.
Not everyone can handle that kind of like constant pressure.
But the rewards can be pretty amazing too, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, for those who thrive in that kind of environment.
Wait, he says like an experienced broker can pull in at least $250,000 a year.
Wow, that's
And then you
terrible.
have the real superstars, the top brokers, they're making millions.
Millions.
Yeah.
It's all about closing deals, building those relationships, understanding every detail of the market.
It's a hustle, but it can pay off.
So we've got the deal makers, we've got the brokers, the ones out there, hustling, making the connections. But what about the financing? Michael Linton's article on the lending side was pretty eye-opening for me.
It's another side of the business that's just as fast-paced, just as deadline-driven, and, assessing risk, that's huge.
Michael Linton really emphasizes that lenders aren't just focused on the upside potential. They're looking at the worst-case scenario.
Right, right. They're like, how much could we lose if things go wrong?
He quotes one credit fund guy who uses what's called peak-to-trough rent data.
Oh, interesting.
And I have to admit, that's new to me. What is that? Peak-to-trough rent data.
Well, think of it as a way for lenders to figure out, like, the worst possible scenario for a property's rent. They look back in time, historical data, to see how far rent dropped during, say, bad economic times.
Oh, I see.
So that tells them how much risk they're taking when they make a loan.
That makes sense. They're kind of like anticipating the worst that could happen, right?
Exactly. And Michael Linton also points out, like, there are so many different types of loans for different purposes. Like, you've got construction loans for new developments, bridge loans for short-term things, and then permanent loans for, acquisitions that are going to be around a while.
So it's not just about getting a loan, it's about getting the right kind of loan.
Totally. And that's what makes it so interesting. It's this like puzzle of figuring out the risk, finding the opportunities, and making sure the deal works for everyone involved. We've talked about brokers and lenders, making those deals happen, getting them financed. But what about the people who really analyze the market, try and figure out where things are going?
The market analysts.
Yeah.
Michael Linton really, really stresses the importance of understanding market dynamics in this world,
Yeah.
He says it's not just looking at numbers on a spreadsheet. You have to, get out there, get your boots on the ground, and really, really understand what's going on in different areas.
And he has a great example in one of his articles, I think. Imagine, right, you're looking at this property and it has like amazing rental rates.
Okay, yeah.
On paper, it looks fantastic, right?
It sounds like a great investment.
But then when you actually visit the place, you realize it's in a high crime area.
Oh, wow. Okay, that changes things.
Right. Suddenly those rents don't seem so appealing anymore.
Yeah.
And that's why Michael Linton's big on these qualitative assessments, going beyond just the numbers.
Beyond the numbers. Yeah.
Really understanding like the neighborhood, the demographics, what's happening in that specific market.
Right. All the trends, all the different things going on.
Exactly. And he calls it uncovering the hidden truths, which I love.
It's like, you're seeing the things the spreadsheet doesn't tell you.
Right. And then, you can't forget about real estate cycles either.
Oh, yeah.
Understanding those. Michael Linton's really big on analyzing historical data,
Yeah.
especially during the downtimes,
Yeah.
Seeing how different types of properties have performed in the past.
Makes sense. You want to know how a property is going to weather an economic storm
Right.
before you invest in it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Michael Linton doesn't just stop at market analysis either.
Okay.
He actually goes into financial modeling. He breaks it down into 3 main types: acquisition, renovation, and development.
Yeah, this is where it gets interesting for me, as someone who's interested in those investment strategies.
Yeah, he explains how each type of model uses different assumptions,
Okay.
It has different outputs. So like an acquisition model, that might be all about predicting cash flow and returns based on the current rents, right?
Yeah.
But then you have a development model, and that could involve more stuff like construction costs, how fast you can lease the units, what the market's going to look like in the future.
It's more complex.
Right. He also uses this really helpful example to explain what's called the cap rate,
Okay.
which, to be honest, was a bit of a mystery to me before I read his stuff.
Yeah, cap rate. It's,
It can be confusing,
yeah.
but Michael Linton breaks it down really well. Basically, it's like how you measure the potential return you could get from a property.
Okay, so a higher cap rate, that means a higher potential return.
Generally, yeah. But
Yeah.
you got to remember, it's just one piece of the puzzle. It's where you start, when you're looking at an investment, you still have to look at everything else before you make a decision.
Makes sense. All right, so we talked about careers, market analysis, financial modeling. Let's get to the real meat of it,
Okay.
the investment strategies.
Yeah.
You mentioned that's what you're really into, right?
Totally. And Michael Linton does not disappoint. He talks about like everything from really conservative strategies to the more risky ones.
So he starts with REITs, or real estate investment trusts,
Yeah.
which are basically like companies that own and manage these income-producing properties.
Right.
So it's a way for investors to get involved in commercial real estate without having to actually buy and manage properties themselves.
Yeah, it's a good way to, diversify your investments.
Okay.
REITs can be more liquid than, say, owning a building directly.
Mm.
And there can be some tax benefits, too.
They're constantly raising capital, right?
Yep.
Which helps them keep buying and developing more
Yep.
stuff.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, besides REITs, Michael Linton talks about a whole range of strategies, kind of based on how much risk you're willing to take and how much return you're hoping for. So you've got what they call core investments, which are generally low risk.
Okay.
These are things like office buildings that are fully leased, maybe a prime retail center, something like that.
So that's for investors who are looking for like steady income and they just want to make sure their money's safe.
Exactly. And then you move up a bit to what they call core plus investments, which, a little bit more risk, but you could get higher returns.
Okay.
That might be properties that need a little bit of work, or maybe they need to be like repositioned in the market to increase their value.
So you're a little more hands-on as an investor.
Yeah. You're hoping to make those returns even better.
Okay. And then even riskier.
Even riskier, you got what they call value add investments. Now these have the potential for, really big returns, but
Oh, I see.
become with more risk.
Like that example we talked about earlier, the old factory being turned into lofts.
Yeah.
That would be a value add play.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And then, at the top of this whole risk pyramid, you have what they call opportunistic investments. Now, those are the high risk, high reward ventures, like if you're doing ground up development or you're taking on these really complex redevelopment projects.
So you're basically betting on yourself to make it work, where other people might just see a lot of risk.
Exactly. And it's crucial for anyone investing to understand this whole risk-return spectrum. You have to know where you stand, how much risk you can handle, and what your long-term goals are.
This is all making so much sense now. It's like Michael Linton's giving us this roadmap,
Hmm.
for navigating this whole investment world.
He really is. And he even goes deeper, talking about debt and equity financing,
Okay, yeah.
explaining how people use loans along with their own money to fund these projects.
And how, like, the structure of that financing can change the returns.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
about finding that balance between how much you borrow, the leverage, and how much risk you're taking on.
Okay.
He even mentions those big institutional investors like the pension funds, insurance
Yeah, the
companies.
ones who can really shake things up.
Right. They have the money to fund those massive projects, and they can really influence those investment
Mm.
trends.
Wow.
It's just like this amazing system where you've got investors, lenders, developers, brokers, analysts, all these different people interacting, creating this world that's always moving and changing.
It's so dynamic.
It is, and it's really cool to have Michael Linton's insights to help us make sense of it all.
It really is.
Yeah.
Before we move on to the last part of this deep dive, I just want to throw this out to you, the listener. Think about everything we've talked about. What are you most curious about now?
Yeah.
Is there a particular investment strategy that you find really interesting? Are you wondering, how all this new technology is changing things? Hold on to that thought, and we're going to explore it more in the final segment. So we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into commercial real estate.
Yeah, really curious to hear what our listeners are thinking about now after, going through all those different parts of the industry.
Absolutely. But before we finish up completely, I wanted to touch on a couple more things from Michael Linton.
Okay.
These are things that I think anyone who's interested in investment strategies is going to, really find valuable.
Yeah, Michael Linton goes into some really interesting details, things that can, make or break an investment.
Exactly.
One thing he's really big on is understanding how different types of properties perform, depending on what's happening in the economy.
Oh, like how office buildings might be riskier during a recession compared to, say, industrial properties.
Exactly. He points out, during the pandemic, for example,
Yeah.
we saw everyone moving towards e-commerce.
Right.
So the demand for industrial space, warehouses and distribution centers went way up.
Yeah.
But office buildings, they were struggling because so many people were working from home.
So it's about knowing what's going to happen in different sectors,
Yeah.
under different economic conditions.
Right. You got to anticipate those trends.
Yeah.
Michael Linton also has some great stuff about commercial leases, which are obviously super important for, how much money a property can make.
Leases, yeah, they can get pretty complicated.
Oh, they can. But he explains the different types, triple net leases where the tenant covers most of the expenses,
Mhm.
gross leases where the landlord handles those costs.
Got it.
He even gives examples of how the lease terms can actually change how much a property's worth. Like, if a building has these long-term leases, with tenants that have good credit, that's going to be a much safer investment.
Compared to one that has like a bunch of short-term leases.
Exactly, or tenants that, might not be so financially stable.
Right, right. It makes sense.
And he also talks about these things called lease escalation clauses, which determine how the rent can go up over time.
Oh, yeah.
Those can have a big impact on how much money an investor makes in the long run.
This is great stuff. This is like, he's giving us this master class in commercial real estate investing.
He really is. And one thing he's very clear about is investing in commercial real estate, it's not a get-rich-quick scheme.
Right.
It's something you got to think long-term about. You got to plan carefully, do your research, and really understand the market.
Makes sense.
He actually dedicates a whole section in one of his articles to what's called due diligence, that process of investigating a property before you buy it or lease it.
Yeah, due diligence, that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. He has this really practical checklist of things you should be looking at, reviewing leases, inspecting the property, making sure everything's in good shape.
Checking out its history.
Exactly. Looking at the zoning regulations, making sure there are no surprises hiding. He even talks about, putting together a team of experts.
Oh, yeah.
Lawyers, accountants, environmental consultants. It's to help you understand all the complicated parts of a real estate transaction.
So you have the right people on your side.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. It's inspired by what Michael Linton talks about, and it's this. What's the future of commercial real estate going to look like? With all these new things happening, remote work, e-commerce, experiential retail,
Right.
How are these trends going to change the industry?
Which sectors are going to do well,
Yeah, which ones are going to struggle?
and what new opportunities are going to come up?
Those are great questions,
Yeah.
And I think Michael Linton would say that the answers depend on a lot of different things, right? Technology changing, populations moving, the economy going up and down, what the government decides to do.
It's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out.
It really is. And for those who want to keep learning and stay ahead of the game, I highly recommend Michael Linton's website,
Yeah.
chicagodealflow.com. He's got tons of articles and resources to help anyone understand this exciting but complex world of commercial real estate.
He's a great guide, for sure.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive. We hope